Okay, guys, last class we started our Zentangle unit, and we took a look at the examples for Zentangles, and we started a sketchbook prompt where you practiced your 5 Zentangle patterns. Alright, let's quiet down, please. Alright, so today we're going to do your abstract Zentangle. We're going to get that started together. Okay, before the break we learned about abstract art, and we know that it doesn't look like anything representational, right? It focuses on line and shape and color and texture. And we took a look at these examples from students of abstract Zentangles. So today you're going to make your own abstract Zentangle using that 8 by 10 inch watercolor paper. You've got your choice of creating your patterns with a Sharpie or a watercolor marker. And then after you do all of your patterns, you're going to add watercolor paint. All right, so this example, they have some really big surface areas of pattern, and then a couple of areas with small pattern. And then you can see they filled in with orange and blue and pink as their watercolors. We've got some areas with flat washes, gradated washes. So let's take a look at the board. For your abstract Zentangle, you need to have a minimum of 6 Zentangle patterns in your artwork. It needs to go all the way off the picture plane, just like the examples. All right, this one's got a lot more going on in terms of complexity, right? And notice it goes all the way off the picture plane. The entire picture plane has either patterns or watercolor. All right, so 6 Zentangle patterns minimum. You've got the 2 handouts on your desk that you can refer to, but also keep in mind that there's hundreds of Zentangle patterns out there. So if you Google Zentangle pattern, you can find even more patterns to use as inspiration. Question? Does it have to be abstract or does it have to be like something? No, today we're doing an abstract Zentangle just like the examples we're taking a look at. Next week, you're going to have the whole week to be doing your final Zentangle assignment, which is going to be the Zentangle that looks like something real. So that's the one that you can do an animal or an insect or a landscape, seascape, cityscape. But today we're doing the abstract Zentangle, okay? All right, we also saw these examples from students. So this one, the patterns are really intricate, right? They use a really fine Sharpie. So I don't have those micro tips. So if you have your own micro tip Sharpie, you could do something like this. And they didn't extend the what's called strings, the lines, all the way off the picture plane. But if you look closely at this, it's super detailed. It's super complex. They've used some variegated washes in the background. All right, notice this one. They've got several different patterns, all kind of following this curvy linear shape. So they've got way more than 6 patterns, actually. Then they've got some areas with larger patterns. So there's some nice contrast between sort of condensed pattern and more open pattern. And then we saw this example, which is really nice, really complex. Lots of undulating lines there that creates all those little spirals and swirls. And then within those swirls, we've got the Zentangle patterns. And then an additional layer, they've used more pigment towards the center and then less pigment. They did a gradated wash there, make it lighter in value. So it looks like the darker pigment recedes and the lighter value comes forward, giving us this illusion of depth for this example. All right, by the way, I'm on the Projects tab on the Zentangles project. Here is an example that I did. All right, and here is a basic way to start your Zentangle, and that is to just start drawing lines. And so as far as Zentangles go, these are called strings. So we've got the lines, and you can overlap them, you can connect them. And the more you overlap and connect, the more areas or surface area you have to fill with pattern. In this case, I actually was using the lines themselves as areas to make Zentangle patterns. And then I did sort of that peacock pattern here and the floral pattern up there. Here's my next step. I started adding in that swirly pattern inside of that circle. Here's my next step where I added more smaller circular patterns to fill in and add some more density. And then my next step, adding in some watercolor washes. I worked mostly wet into wet here. Remember wet into wet, where you lay down first clean water, then you put the watercolor into it so that it feels really soft and bloomy. I've got some areas of gradated washes and also variegated washes. All right, so we're thinking about using the entire picture plane, extending your design off the picture plane, using a minimum of 6 Zentangle patterns, and then when you're done with all of your Zentangle patterns, you're adding watercolor paint. And I should see a minimum of 3 watercolor techniques from your list of 20. So remember things like flat washes, gradated washes, variegated washes, dry brushing, salting, water drop, lifting. Remember all that? Okay, last class I started a Zentangle. All right, so this is what I did, actually worked the whole period with the class. All right, and first I did all of my Zentangle patterns. As you can see, I've got a lot more than 6. And to create some unity, I added, well, technically to create some unity, I duplicated some of the patterns, like this pattern can be found in a couple of spots to help create some unity. I did a little bit of balance by doing this sort of, reminds me of coral, this pattern, and duplicated it over here. All right, I've got some contrast between organic patterns and geometric patterns. All right, so we like contrast, right? So I've got some contrast between organic patterns versus the geometric patterns. Okay, once again, I duplicated some, like I duplicated this floral pattern right here and right here 3 times. I duplicated that peacock pattern. I've got some of that organic circular and wavy pattern going on here and here. Another one of the organic patterns that I sort of did free flow down here. Right, then I added that sort of geometric chain link pattern over here. And I started adding some watercolor. So right here, I've added wet into wet, variegated wash, green and blue. And then right here, I was just working wet on dry with 2 different hues of orange and kind of a coral orange. And so I'm going to keep going and fill in the other areas. It's a really nice idea to have areas that feel loose, like the washes, but then areas that you purposefully color in or paint in with fine detail. So for instance, I could go in to these areas, these larger areas of this somewhat kind of cactus looking thing, and actually just be really detail oriented and do each little spot right here. All right, so think about contrast between textures, contrast between watercolor techniques, contrast between your patterns, organic versus geometric. Also think about line weight. So if you want a pattern to feel really heavy, use thicker line. If you want a pattern to feel more light and delicate, only use the very tip of the Sharpie so you get the thinnest line. Or if you can get your hands on a micro Sharpie, that would help too. All right, so technically, let's get started. Everybody should have their 8x10 watercolor paper. Let's get started together. And you have your Sharpie. All right, the first thing that you want to do is lay down some of your strings. And, we're not planning this one out. This is going to be all very organic and just see how it happens. All right, so the first thing you want to do is lay down your strings. I'm going to start on the edge of the paper and go off the edge of the paper again. All right, so once again, this is all going to be very organic, very unplanned. There's my second string. The more strings you lay down, the more spots you're going to have to fill your patterns. All right, so I'll start with that as my, actually add some more stuff too later, maybe here. So I'm going to start with this as my beginning strings, and I'm going to start adding my patterns. All right, and you can always add more strings later, more lines later. All right, and by the way, you've got your 2 pattern handouts on your desk. So I think I'm going to start out with this diamond one as a geometric one to add. And keep in mind, that all of these patterns are really contained within the square. You can modify the pattern to extend into whatever space you want. All right, so I think I'm going to start right here, and it's obviously not a square. So I'm going to figure out, how do I do this diamond pattern in this irregular area? Okay, and the other thing to consider is you can do this, landscape orientation or portrait orientation. But for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be rotating my paper a lot, just kind of rotating it all the time to see where I want to put stuff. So don't be afraid to rotate your page. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to put on some little Zen music for us.
for some reason I can't find
I don't know.
Do
Did
you
you put
know
it back on the
anywhere else they
cabinet?
store it, or is that the only place that they have it?
That's the only place.
Check again.
Okay, so I've used almost 9 patterns now, and I'm going to keep going. Maybe I'll add some different patterns, but maybe I'll duplicate some of my patterns in other areas to create, once again, some nice unity and some balance, contrasting with the organic patterns and the geometric patterns. And I did this like the swirled one right here. And later with the watercolor, I'm going to add some of that shading that we see in the example so that it looks like the bottom of the loop is receding and the top of the loop comes forward. All right, so keep going with your Zentangles, and when you feel like when you're happy with all of your patterns, then you'll move on to adding your watercolor paint.